You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Homefield Apparel.
Right up Meridian, baby.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Right Up Meridian podcast. Scott here with you. And we wrapped up the Tyrese Halliburton Invitational. Unfortunately, the Pacers did not beat the Lakers. Bummer of a game. The Pacers end up losing 123 to 109. You got to give the Pacers credit, though. They came back. You know, the Lakers took a couple of punches at them, and the Pacers, man, they took their punch. They came back, and that final score really is not indicative of how close that game was. It was a 3-point game with 6 minutes to go. Again, not on this pod. We're not going to do a game-by-game breakdown, but I think any Pacers fan has to leave this in-season tournament happy. Obviously, it sucks to lose. It would have been nice to win the whole thing, but you saw, where the Pacers need to go. And, the Lakers are just a high-level team. When you could be throwing guys like, Hachimura and Davis at Halliburton, that's a ton of length. Not a lot of teams are going to be able to do that. They were able to take down the Bucks, but and the Celtics in a one-game series, but they weren't able to take down the Lakers. And the Lakers are, a slightly better team than the Pacers, and I think that's okay. I think for most Pacers fans, myself included, this has been a fun season. It's going to hopefully continue to be a fun season. It was a fun ride, but I think we all know this team is not, championship caliber right now, and the Lakers are. And you're also playing a guy in LeBron who's just, I've been watching basketball for a long time. And, in the era that I grew up, I'm always going to be a Jordan guy. So, if you give me the Jordan LeBron, I'm going to take Jordan in that category. And the stuff LeBron does that does kind of drive me nuts. That said, man, LeBron is good. And at 38, about to be 39, it's absurd how good he is and how he's the best player on the floor. And the thing that amazes me is for most guys, like TJ McConnell is a great example. If you're in the NBA, you got to go 100% all the time. You just have to, or you're going to lose your spot. And you see a guy like Ben Mathurin. At times, you can see him kind of not give full effort. It's evidently apparent. You're just like, wow, it's like you see it right there. LeBron has just mastered this ability to, and I say this honestly in the glowing terms. This is not a knock because he's 38. He's mastered this ability to know when to go full effort and then to be able to coast other times during the game. And he's able to coast, large stretches of the game. He's not, picking up the number one guy defensively. He's normally, taking a lower guy on defense. And there's offensive plays where he just passes and kind of just stands there. And not even like, standing in the dunker spot or standing in the, wing shooter spot. He's just kind of up at the top, just like, I'm taking this play off. But it's like, if he sees things aren't going right, like he'll engage and then he'll just immediately cut to the basket. It's like his ability to be like, all right, I'm only going to, exert energy that's going to get us, good defensive plays or get us scores. It's unbelievable. The guy is a basketball savant. And that's what you're up against. And, young teams are going to take their lumps. So, we leave the in-season tournament in a really good spot. The Pacers obviously equipped themselves very well, and you saw Halliburton, really step up into that next tier. I think for all of us who are watching the Pacers, we've known for a while how good Halliburton is, but it really shone through these last couple of weeks. And I think it started with those 2 games against the 76ers. And then obviously the game against the Celtics, the game against the Bucks. And even, even this game, he didn't play a great game, but he still had 20 points, 11 assists, 3 turnovers, which isn't, for a normal point guard with the amount of usage he has, normally isn't bad. It's a little high for Halliburton just because he's set his standards so low, but still, a 20 and 11 in 35 minutes. That's not bad. I mean, he shot 25% from 3. A lot of those were kind of deeper threes. He was being pushed out. But, for a game, you're like, man, he didn't have a great game. He still had a pretty good game. Still, like, not bad. Not bad for that. So, it's nice to see him move up to that next echelon. And I think it was a good learning experience for the team because if you're Halliburton, it's like, all right, now, you've stepped up. I think people do realize this, but now you've also kind of seen, all right, as it starts to ratchet up and as I move into the next echelon of guy, I'm going to get this kind of treatment, and how am I going to react? I think that's going to be interesting to see. The thing I want to talk about, and I'm kind of interested about, that I've heard talked about a little bit, is like what should or do the Pacers do from here? By the way, last thing, I'll cut myself off. Very Scott here. You are running into a road trip now where you have 4 games in 6 days. So you're at Detroit, you're at Milwaukee, you're at Washington, you're at Minnesota. You got to go 2-2 in this stretch. Detroit and Washington are garbage teams. You've got to go 2-2. Minnesota's really good. Milwaukee is obviously really good. You come home the next week. You're home to the Clippers, home to Charlotte. This is a stretch. 3-3 would be nice. 4-2 would be a little bit better in this 6-game stretch. And I guess you have at Memphis the day after. So, it starts coming fast and furious here, and this is where the high of the in-season tournament is great, but now you do need to start looking at playoff seeding. And if you go, 4-4 in the next 8, or even 3 and 5, sorry, math's hard, 3 and 5, you could start to lose ground on being a playoff team or a play-in team, and you cannot let that happen. So, there is work to be done. We'll continue to kind of stay on that here. The thing that I find interesting is you definitely saw it in the game against the Lakers. The Pacers have a really fun young team. They're missing the next guy. Who is the other guy who can take a lot of pressure off of Halliburton? Mathurin didn't have a bad game, 20 points, but I think definitely in year 2, we haven't seen enough out of Mathurin, and definitely he hasn't been an efficient enough scorer. Even when he puts up the 20 points, it's relatively inefficient how he gets it. His defense has been okay. It's also his second year, so we're not sure if it's going to get there. But there have been reports out there the Pacers are aggressively looking to make a move, and I think they understand that you have what could possibly be here I don't say generational talent, but like a very high level talent in Halliburton. Maybe generational. Like once every 10, 15 years, you get a dude like this. You got him here. You got him locked up. He seems like he wants to stay. You've got to now build a team around him. And I think this puts the Pacers at a very interesting crossroads. And these are the kind of things I like to talk about on this pod, a little bit bigger picture. What should the Pacers do? Should they be looking to make the move now or wait and hold on? There's kind of 2 ways, I think, to look at it. If you look at let's make the move right now. You look at free agency. And my brother-in-law has brought this up, that there's a lot of good free agents this offseason. He's kind of circled Paul George, which is an interesting – it's interesting in its own right. Paul George coming back. Paul George was probably like, hey, and he's actually been saying, Paul George has been saying a lot of nice things about Indiana on his podcast. He's had Halliburton on, I think, twice. So, read into the tea leaves what you want there. But the thing with Paul George is he's 33 now. And I think you have to remember, too, Halliburton is 23. I mean, he is so young. I don't mind going after like a Paul George in free agency. I would really, stress to the Pacers to not think about doing a move and moving some of your assets for somebody in that age range. Not that Paul George isn't good or wouldn't be a good teammate with Halliburton, but I think you have to look at the age range and kind of the cycle of these things. And I'm not comparing at all these teams together, but, when you had Jordan and Pippen, they kind of were at the same age trajectory and were able to grow and build that together. Curry, Clay, and Draymond were all, when they started, that 23, 24, 25 range. It's very unlikely to have a really long run. Even like, Jamal Murray and Jokic are both like 26 or 27. Murray's 26 and Jokic is, let me pull it up here, he is 28. So, I mean, they're right in line with each other. If you put a Paul George in there who's 33 with a 23-year-old, you're giving yourself a really small window because, time works mysteriously, but in 3 years, Paul George is going to be 36. And that's right when Halliburton should be hitting his, like, the beginning of his apex prime. And it's like now you have an aging Paul George who isn't going to bring you what you need. So I think that's something to look at. When you look at like who are the really hot young stars at that age range, it becomes the same thing with like Pascal Siakam. He's been a name that's been ballied about. And I think, he's an interesting option. I think he's 29. Yep, pulling up right now. He's 29 years old. So it's not awful. But you're still getting that, like, he'll be 33, 34 near the apex of Halliburton's prime. And I think that's what you have to look at. As I look at the and everyone's like, OG Anunoby's up there. He's a little bit closer to the timeline. I'm not sure OG brings you enough, and that's where I would look, and again, this is easier said than done because the really good stars who are young just aren't typically moved. We got Halliburton. We also gave up theoretically a young star as well. You look at, like, if you go back to the Raptors, you have Scotty Barnes. He is 22 years old. That would be just a perfect running mate. How you pull Scotty Barnes away from the Raptors, I don't know. But, Scotty Barnes has 2 years left on his deal. He's got this year, and then next year is a $10 million team option. And then he's a free agent in 2025, 2026. So, maybe you let this season play through, and then it's like, all right, we're going to make a push at Scotty Barnes next year. Because that would be, if you could go for somebody like that, that could be the perfect age-wise timeline. Another one in that, kind of vein, the contracts get a little bit tougher on this one, but like Lauri Markkanen with the Jazz is 26 years old. He has $17 million this year, $18 million in 2025. And then after that, he's a free agent. So, next year, you got two guys who are going to be expiring contracts. Those teams might want to move off of them. The Raptors could be in complete full rebuild mode, although they never seem to want to rebuild. They should be. They could be in full rebuild mode. So, I would look at it that way. The other way to look at it, too, is, you don't want to do it too early. Let this team, breathe and go for it. Let them just see where it goes, because I'm not sure anybody on this team is going to be a number two, but let's just see. Like I said, Mathurin is still really young. He could get there. Maybe in his third year, he's there, and it would suck if you're like, damn, we just traded that away to go for this, and like we should have just given it a little more time. Same thing with Obi Toppin. I think Obi Toppin has been a very great player to play with Halliburton. Let's see what he can do. I think there's definitely an argument to letting it breathe, and that's where I would lean on. The counter to that, just continuing to do 180s with myself here and just get myself in a pretzel. But this is where I think the Pacers are in an interesting spot. I think it's the Yogi Berra line. It gets real early, gets real late quick here, or real, late early here. Right now, the Pacers have the most cap space. They have some of the most flexibility out there. So that's going to go away quicker than you think. So at the end of this year, looking at their cap space, they have $126 million in the books this year, $117 million on the books next year. Some of that is, locked up. Some of that are team options. The only player option is Jalen Smith at $5.4 million. But you look at, like, there's some things that are going to have to be figured out. Bruce Brown is a player option at $23 million. Do you want to pay that? I'm not saying yes or no, but you have to figure that out. You have Buddy Hield is making $19 million this year. He's probably going to want more. Given the way that the CBA is set up and the apron stuff, it's a whole different discussion. I would venture to go back and listen to, like, Bill Simmons and Russillo did a podcast on this where they deep dive into it. You're going to get into a world where you basically have teams like the Celtics, where you have two dudes making, max money, and then everyone else is going to be at like $2 to $3 million. The Celtics still have Porzingis and Holiday, but that's kind of like they made some trades that are not going to be able to be made in the future based on apron rules. You're going to get down to where teams have, like, maybe the Bucks are a better example, where you have Giannis, you have Lillard, and that's kind of all you can pay. And then everyone else is going to need to be a $5 or $10 million guy. Like, they couldn't sign Lopez in 3 years based on the apron stuff, what they did last year. So anyway, in reality, Hield everyone's like, oh, is he get 22, 24? Like, I don't think so. Like, I just don't think there's a world where teams are going to be able to pay him that, because that's just too much of your cap space to eat up when you're looking at, like, you need to get, you want to keep under that, 130, 140 cap, and you're going to have a dude like Halliburton making 40. And then if you want another stud, that's 40. And then it's like, there you go. You're at 80. Like, boom, you get to 80 and 90 real quick when you have two dudes on there. You can't then be throwing, you throw 20 to Heald, you suddenly don't have a lot of other money to go around, or it's got to be in that $3 to $5 million range. So I don't know what you do with Heald. You can't let that asset walk. It's an expiring contract. He's a great shooter. You almost have to kind of feel with him now, like, hey, man, do you want to play with, Halliburton for the next 2 years and maybe give us a team-friendly contract? Again, he's not quite on the timeline either. He's one of the older guys on the team. Obi Toppin has a great contract this year at $6.8 million. This is unfortunately a problem that you're going to have with Halliburton, is you're going to bring these guys over like an Obi Toppin, and Halliburton is going to make them better because he gives guys so many good shots, and a dude like Obi Toppin, it's like, it's just is perfect with what he does and what Halliburton provides him. The trouble is now, Obi Toppin's going to probably be worth more than what he's making now. Again, I think it's going to take 2 or 3 years for everyone to kind of reset and understand, what guys like Toppin should be making. In an old world, it's like, oh, he's like, $14, $15 million a year now. Again, in the world of 2 stars and the hard cap and the apron cap, I'm not sure that's the case, but I'm not sure it's going to get figured out that quickly. Can you get Toppin at $10 million? So if I'm just looking at our salaries next year. If you give Bruce Brown the team option based on everything else, and let's say you re-sign, Obi Toppin at, let's say, $10 million, you also have Aaron Nesmith. Let's not forget that. Like, he got an extension. It's not on this. He has an extension. It's not been updated on there. You're over 135, 140 if you re-sign Toppin. That's not to mention if you want to go get somebody. If you want to get somebody in free agency, like let's say you go get Paul George at like 30, 40 million a year, like boom, you're already in the apron. Like, all that flexibility is completely gone. And you're not even, 12 months into the honeymoon period of this Halliburton thing. So it's going to get really tough really quickly. And that's where, as I look at, do you wait? You can do that, but you're also giving up opportunities to make a move. And so I don't know. And, you also have to factor in, like, can you win this? Can you win it all? Like, if you're going to make that move, you got to be like making a move to think you can win. I'm not sure our role players are there. And again, this is still early. I mean, we weren't even sure we were like a playoff team, 5 weeks ago. So I think you err on the side of not making a move. But I would just say, as you start playing, trade calculator stuff, look for guys that fit the timeline of Halliburton. And don't forget how young he is. But also, if you're like, hey, man, we should wait 2 or 3 years, see how this plays out. In 2 or 3 years, you're going to be pushed to make a decision, and maybe then you aren't able to make the decision that you want to make. All of that said, again, as I look at it, I look at next year with Scotty Barnes and or Lauri Markkanen both, being at the end of their contracts and having a new contract coming up in 2025. I think that's a window. If you're the Pacers, you look at like, hey, man, we make our move next year, grabbing one of those guys, or we go hard in free agency in 2025 for them. And this year, maybe we try and get Paul George on a slightly friendly contract, or, we try and get a friendly deal with Obi Toppin. Maybe we move off of somebody else and, try and get George in, knowing that we keep enough dry capital back to make a run for a Scotty Barnes type in 2025. Those are all the hopes. This is also where, I hate to say it, it's like, you need Mathurin to continue to get better. Like, you do. You need him to continue to get an asset. And I know that, we had Dustin Dupirac on a little bit ago. He wasn't as concerned about Jarris Walker. I continue to go back to it just because that's a guy you're paying $6 million to. Next year, you're paying 6.3 to. That was a very, for the Pacers, a high lottery pick. For these things to work, you need a guy who's young with Halliburton. Those guys don't often come up in free agency. Those guys are really hard to trade for. Normally, the way that you get them, look at the examples I gave earlier. Look at with Jordan and Pippen, they were both drafted. Look at the Warriors, Clay, Draymond, Curry, they were all drafted. Like, this is your window to get those draft picks, and you need Walker to be something, whether he's a running mate or you go with the 76ers route and you start trading assets before you know they're good. There's that. Or you hope that you hit on a later pick like a Tyrese Maxey with the Sixers again. But it's like this is where Walker just cannot be a bust. I'm not saying he is yet, but it is, if he's not going to be playing in the NBA level, I feel like we need to know sooner rather than later, because if not, like you've got to, if he's not playable, trade him now while at least there's still some like hope for the future, or see if you can get some play for him and then maybe raise his value. Or again, I don't want to trade. The best is just like let him play and make him a valuable asset. But at some point, he's got to start seeing the court, because again, it's you're going to have to start making a decision. You can't just sit around and wait on that forever. So, just some thoughts. We'll continue to dig into this. We have this long road trip coming up. I am actually going to be on vacation next week, so we may or may not have a pod next week, but we'll definitely have one after Christmas. At that point, man, we'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games between now and Christmas. We'll have a lot more to know about this team, and that's like, dude, another 10th of the schedule will be gone in 2 weeks. It's going to happen really fast here. And again, this is where the Pacers, as we've talked about before in some of the earlier pods, they have 3 or 4 losses on their schedule now that we're just like, damn, those were really winnable games. You can't let too many of those pile up, or else you're going to be stuck in that 7, 8, 9 range in the East, battling for a play-in spot. And I think we've all seen this team is dangerous. This team is fun. This team has some serious high-level talent. It'd be nice to see them out of the play-in and in the playoff area. So that's where we're at now. I want to thank you all for listening, as always. And for Right Up Meridian, this is Scott signing off.